You're very distant from what your vision of this thing was at the beginning, aren't you? You're very far from this picture of yourself as a successful artist. I could have told you years ago it was a waste of time. Not that you would have listened to me. Not that I would have listened to myself if I knew. But deep down I knew anyways. You know how much time you sunk into this. You know how many years of your life you've spent begging, arms up in the air, praying, well, metaphorically, that something would happen, that something would come your way, that some recognition of your talent, that some sort of spiritual apotheosis, revelation, would have taken over, and that there would be some sort of endgame. But nothing came. Why? Why is that? Well, if you have to ask yourself that question, you already know. It's because you weren't good enough. But not being good enough really applies to something on a subjective level. It doesn't apply to you as a person. Your own self-worth and psychology and all that fucking, mindfulness, well-being horseshit aside. You didn't measure up to what other people wanted. It's no biggie. You know that sensation you've got when you go past, scrolling past someone's work on a page? You see what they're doing, and you just kind of, not even like a negative reaction, just sort of a, get it out of here. I don't care. It's that. It's basically you've compounded the amount of times that has happened to the things that you've shown other people, and you've internalized it. Suddenly it hits you. Fuck, right? It's been 10 years. All this stuff that you've done, all the stuff that you've shown people, hundreds and thousands of eyes possibly upon your work. And not one of them was a benevolent billionaire. Not one of them was a benevolent fucking patron that would take you under their wing and just whisk you away. It's a submissive act. Fundamentally. It is a submissive act to be creative. You're at the whims of the hive that surround you. You're not at your own terms. You can call them your own terms just because there's a separation there, be it psychological, social, mental, whatever it is. You can't relate to other people. Ooh, big deal. Does that make you so special? No. It kind of makes you the opposite of special. It kind of makes you valueless. There's an assigned value to eyeballs paying attention to you in the first place, paying attention to your work. I think it's that insecurity that drives the urge to create to begin with. A sensation of meaning, things that come out. Whether it be positive, I've said this to people in my life before. Positive work versus negative work. Where does that come from? Where do the images of positivity versus negativity come into art? Did you start creating out of a place of negativity? I know I did. I know I fucking did. Whether it be this sort of exploratory solitude into themes that you've read in other people's works. Say, for example, you got into 19th century French literature, poetry readings, things of that nature, and you found yourself unable to actually relate the things that you now knew. You knew these things. You knew these themes. These grandiose, sweeping fucking aesthetics that encompass the entire world and other people's minds, and played into it somehow. You had a glimpse of the eternal. That shook you off. You're done. You're completely fucking done. You got shaken off the train. The rest of the ride is just you. Now, here's where the positive note comes in. Since it is a display, since art's performance, everything that has to do with the showcasing of your worth via your production, because that's sort of the nature of it. It's not that you couldn't create things in a total vacuum all alone on a desert island or locked in a cage somewhere, because you can. It's another root cause of art, is having this sort of isolation. But to the extent that you're playing a social game, there is a positive note. You start to know people a little bit better based on how they respond. Now, you might have learning disabilities of sorts. Who doesn't, after all, on this planet? Treat it like a scientific exercise. The positive feedback that you receive, even if it's something as simple as drawing porn, because this is a large part of the game. Even if it's something as simple as communicating something that provokes lusts. whether those lusts be for attention, ego validation, straight up evoking cum from a man's balls, or, clitoral stimulation in the mind of some sort of sheltered and isolated hyper woman of the internet, that sort of thing. Whatever the game is, you're exposed to it, you're exposing other people to it. You have an impact on the world, albeit minute. All right? Don't get ahead of yourself. You're a tiny piece of this thing. Whatever you fed into the planet, whatever you fed into the algorithm at large, it's a pretty good allegory for how to define the meta-consciousness and shit like that. I don't delve into those subjects too much because, honestly, it's it's sort of a boner killer. Talk about the fact that everything is tied together. Talk about the fact that your words, your meaning, the things that you've put into this world, they all sort of coalesce into one big blob. And no one cares about that blob. But the blob is everything you are. The rest of it's shit. If you start to look at it from this perspective of, it made me happy or it didn't make me happy, you're going away from the point here. I'm meandering. The idea is you're outward facing. The idea is, by participating in this thing at all, you're seeking to evoke a reaction that causes others to notice you, to pay attention to you, to take care of you. You want to be carried by the hive. This is a pretty consistent theme in everything artistic, everything that has to do with the world at large, and I don't know. Suppose for a minute that there was some sort of grand side effect to your output. That you could somehow, with a brush or a stroke of a pen, change the minds of hundreds of thousands of people. Well, I would argue that this is not necessarily your idea. I don't think that that was something that came into your mind to say that you wish to change the world. Because before you knew it was possible to change the world, before you had a thought in your brain that told you that an avenue or a possibility or a vein of profit could exist, whereby you could influence others and they would carry you or carry your ideas into immortality. Before that sort of pseudo-spiritual avenue opened up, you didn't have any real concept of what your work could do. The manipulation is getting your ego to show up to the game. And the manipulation in the work that you do is getting other people's egos to show up in the game. Because people don't partake in things unless it has this direct sort of appeal to the immortal, appeal to the fucking heavens. What is it? What do they call it? An appeal to heaven. That kind of thing. Not that I necessarily understand the intricacies of what that even means, but you get what I'm saying. You're not on a level playing field here. And the level playing field is sort of the one that runs against the grain of the ego, the one that runs against the grain of what would get you to do anything at all. It's death. It's the fear of death. It's everything that you don't want. The things that you do want have to do with prolonging and evoking thoughts into matter, that kind of thing. The transcendence of it, this idea that you have in your head. I know it's unhealthy, all right, but we've all got it to an extent. It's a God complex. It's small. Could be a tiny, tiny little God complex, but it is a God complex nonetheless. You wish to change things with your thoughts. You wish to look at other people and reduce them to mere objects that perform in a ballet of your design. This is normal. This is perfectly fucking normal and healthy to do. But it's also the healthiest part of that process is to realize that you can't actually do it. The instinct is good, though. The instinct is what you're actually looking at and trying to drive the study of art and fine art and, the continued existence of the pursuit of the divine and the immortal, pleasure and beauty. Beauty with a capital B, by the way, very symbolic, as opposed to beauty with a lowercase b. So this is the kind of thing that you have to spend years of your life devoted to semantics and what the kill room in an upscale gallery would be, for example, where you get someone high on coke and get them drunk and get them to spend 40 grand on a piece of shit that you made over a weekend. but that piece of shit that you made over a weekend has to be masterfully presented. That is the game. That is the real game. With everything. It's a condensation of business, of life, and society. Art is kind of everything. That's the problem. Is when you start delving into what everything is, you can just go fucking insane. And a lot of people do. Whether I did or not is kind of irrelevant at this point. You got to get above it. Insanity is kind of irrelevant when you're functional. That's kind of the problem that a lot of people have. They don't like seeing functional dysfunction, according to the rules of engagement that they've set up for themselves. You live atop... At this moment, here's sort of, I guess, the theme whereby I would draw this right here, thing that I've drawn, is sort of a recurring theme in my own life. You're constantly looking at the ruins of former constructs, of former temples, of former sacred things. It's always in passing. You're building a new one without realizing it, and you only realize it exists once it's destroyed, and you're looking at its ruins. This is also metaphorical, but to say that an artistic mindset, a poetic mindset, could be a symptom of something larger, could be a condition in which you are thrust, I think that is more important to realize than, I guess, the ultimate goal of whatever it is art is. Because, we're not really smart enough to know what that is. I'm sorry. It's just true.